Man, your boy was about to go off on Nikola Vucevic in the post-game video had the Bulls blown this game in overtime because I don't know how you missed 2 free throws to ice a game with 6 seconds left when all you had to do was make one of them. But thankfully, the Bulls locked in, stopped making silly plays, didn't mess around, and finish off one of the worst teams in the NBA in overtime. Although, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of Bulls fans on the taking side were annoyed to see the Bulls come out on top of a game against a team that they could potentially be fighting for lottery balls come summer. And yes, this wasn't exactly a win you could necessarily be proud of like the other night when you saw some key contributions from the younger guys and their overall development. But regardless, this was a game the Bulls were supposed to win against a Hornets team, a depleted Hornets team that have lost, I believe, 16 of their last 17 games and without 2 of their best players in the Melo Ball and Brandon Miller. I kid, by the way, about Vucevic because while it was pretty bad that he missed 2 free throws in regulation, we all know Vucevic has had a hell of a season thus far and has normally been money for the Bulls, especially in clutch moments. And let's be real, that was an insane prayer of a 3 from Miles Bridges to heave that with time running out to send it into overtime. For a guy who's been one of the worst 3-point shooters in the league this season and who just finished this game shooting 2 for 13 overall from deep. Like, come on, man, that was just ridiculous. But anyway, this game likely isn't going to be as close had Zach Lavine played in this one, as he was out with a bruised toe, or at least they were talking about on the broadcast it being purple and white. It sounds like he'll be back for the game against the Wizards on New Year's Day, but without Zach, the Bulls scoring really suffered, as you saw. I mean, they only had 15 points in the first quarter. That was a season low for points in a quarter for the Bulls. They shot the ball horribly, 37% overall from the field. They took 60 threes in this game, 60 of them, and only made 18, which, by the way, the Hornets and Bulls yet again combined for a total of 75 missed 3-pointers in this game. If that number sounds familiar, it's because it was circulating all over social media just a couple weeks ago about how the Bulls and Hornets combined for 75 missed threes, although this was 75 missed threes in regulation, but still a lot of missed threes in a game that went into overtime. And I will say I was pretty surprised at the overall poor shot selection from the Bulls. Like, this isn't a good defensive team. They're not a good team, period. They don't have strong interior defenders. Take that thing to the rack and finish at the hoop. Like, what are we doing here, hoisting up a bunch of threes against the Charlotte Hornets? That nearly cost the Bulls the game when they could have easily just gone inside. The problem, though, is even when they were going inside, it wasn't really working either. Vucevic's soft touch wasn't going in. The Giddey floaters that we've seen go down more recently weren't falling. The mid-range game was non-existent. I mean, really, outside of Patrick Williams and Torrey Craig, of all people, who I'll get to, no one shot the ball well in this matchup. Vucevic went 6 for 14, good enough for 16 points. Coby White, 8 for 24. He was a putrid 1 for 11 from 3. Giddey, 4 for 16, 1 for 9 from 3. Why was he taking so many threes? Modest Buzelis was 1 for 6. Just nothing was falling down for these guys. That said, the Bulls crashed the boards well. They moved the ball well up and down the court. That part of their offense wasn't bad when it came to their overall transition passing and pick and roll plays, but they just couldn't finish. Except for Torrey Craig, who, let's be real, the Bulls likely don't win this game without his contributions off the bench tonight. What's funny is I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, because on one hand, great for the Bulls showcasing some potential trade value for Craig to be a solid veteran wing for a contending team who may even throw the Bulls a second-round pick now after seeing this game. But at the same time, Torrey Craig closed out the game both in the fourth quarter and also in overtime. Clutch game situation that probably would have been great experience for some of the younger Bulls. I get it, because between Modest, Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, none of them played especially well, which further adds to the point. What does that say when these guys haven't been good enough for these types of moments and you have to go with Torrey Craig to close out the game? But that debate aside, I mean, Craig was incredible in this game, making big plays down the stretch, not only knocking down some clutch threes, especially in overtime, but saving possessions for the Bulls on the offensive glass, getting some big time stops on defense. 18 points for Craig, 5 for 7 from 3, 6 for 10 overall, all of this in 21 minutes of play. Some contending team needs to take this guy for some great value on a vet minimum deal, because he's actually a productive player when he's given the minutes. And then Patrick Williams, the only other consistent shooter in this game, back in his home state, hits 5 threes, started out the game hot, hit a big 3 in the fourth quarter to create some separation, 17 points for Pat on 5 for 11 shooting. A few things I will say about some of these other guys, even though they didn't have the best shooting nights. Coby White was attacking, was aggressive when the Bulls needed him to be. I didn't like some of the shots that he took, especially those from 3, but when the Bulls needed a bucket, he came through. and was doing a little bit of everything tonight. Man nearly had a triple-double, 23 points, 10 rebounds, 9 assists. I believe they said the 10 rebounds was a season high for him. So even though he was struggling to shoot the ball, he was contributing in other ways, and overall had a great game. And then the other guy I wanted to call out is Josh Giddey, because Giddey, one thing that has been impressing me more recently is his effort playing off-ball defense. Like, his on-ball defense is still pretty meh. He'll often get beat off the dribble easily, but he's been much more focused on hounding his man to prevent backdoor cuts to the basket and fighting through screens. But also for Giddey, how about crashing the offensive glass tonight? Getting the Bulls second chance points, 12 rebounds for Josh Giddey tonight, 5 of them being offensive boards alone. Now, it was interesting because Billy Donovan did actually bring Giddey into the game with about 4 minutes left to go. Hornets had a couple of possessions where they scored. He then brings Lonzo Ball back for the final couple minutes and sits Giddey, except for that final sideline out of bounds play. But then in overtime, Billy decides to go with Lonzo and Giddey together, which was clearly a much better lineup, as evident in how much better the Bulls looked on offense and how they ran the ball in overtime. Like, that really should have been the closing lineup in regulation. I get that you want to go with your better defenders in those moments, but in my view, had Billy Donovan just gone with Lonzo and Giddey to finish off the game, you likely don't see this thing going into overtime and the Bulls finishing it off more comfortably. Lonzo played a lot today. I feel like this was the most minutes he's played all season, 26 in total, and get this, man was a plus 25 when he was on the court, while all the other starters were in negative territory. 4 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 rebounds, and 3 steals for Lonzo when he was on the court. It's been reported the Bulls are seeking second rounders for him as well. We'll see if that happens as we get closer to the deadline. But anyway, overall, this was a pretty ugly game, kind of a weird win for the Bulls where you're like, okay, good to get the win, but you got the win on the backs of most of these guys that aren't going to be with the team long term. Most of them might not even be here in a month, and you're further cementing yourself in that play-in territory. Anyway, it is what it is. Very possible the Bulls are going to make it 3 straight wins when they play the Wizards on Wednesday. But anyway, let me know what you guys thought of this game in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.